you could help them there. So, 3 great questions. When you come up with the data, you're looking at it, okay, ask, what's the so what? Okay, we found this data. We've got this information now. So what? What does it mean? Question, is this really valuable or not? What's useful, what's not useful? You need to be putting it in, taking it out. So what is the so what? Okay, I found this information, so what? Oh, this is critical because. That's the sort of a question you've got to have for yourself to make sure you're on track. If the facts contradict your hypothesis, change your hypothesis. It's only a starting point in the beginning and it'll evolve all the way through the process as you get closer and closer to your conclusions. So that's the first question. What's the so what? The second one is do sanity checks. Does this actually sound right? You know, you might have found something that looks okay, but it doesn't really sort of fit with logic or it doesn't sort of fit with your own experience. Question it. It may not be right. You know, is your recommendation feasible? Will it have a noticeable impact on the organisation? You know, don't forget your common sense. And does this sound about right? If it sounds about right, keep going with it. If it doesn't sound quite right, question it a bit deeper and a bit harder. Remember, there are limits to analysis. Okay, you only need to take it to a certain point. You're not going to do the whole project for the company. You're going to give them a roadmap and a path forward for them to explore in depth. Your job is to suggest this is the direction the company should go. This is a new innovation they should encourage to adopt and apply. That's your job. Their job is to actually execute it. So analysis only take up to a certain part. Intuition is always important, okay? And don't get paralysis by analysis because there's no point. It just takes up so much time. The other problem is a brilliant strategy that can't be implemented is useless. If you come up with something really elegant and really clever, but it's not actually viable, there's no point. Absolutely no point. And also, you know, if you come up with something that's really cheap, low cost to the company, but it actually doesn't provide much output or top line numbers, it may not be any great value. When I was a project client, I paid my money, I got my report, and we had lots of meetings. It wasn't like they weren't briefed, we had lots of meetings, and I'm a brilliant briefer because I'm doing JMEC, right? So I know how to brief them on. The report came back, was not going to cost my company, it was a National Australia Bank at that time, a lot of money. But it wasn't going to produce much money either. It was a cheap, meaningless solution in the end. So I couldn't use it, and straight in the bin. Could not use it because I needed something. Okay, maybe I need to spend a bit more money, but actually give me a deliverable. Give me something that would change my business and have impact. They came back to me with a cheap solution that had very little impact. So what would be the point? Why would I even bother? So don't forget that your client's going to look at it from a different viewpoint. So think about it from the CEO's point of view. We're not only cost-driven, we're also outcome-driven. Okay? And what do you think the top 5 priorities of the CEO might be? You mightn't be dealing with the CEO. You might be dealing with someone down the lower chain of command. But you've got to think, what's the CEO thinking here? Because guess who's going to give the decision, the go-ahead, to put the recommendation you're making into train of actual execution, and who's going to put the money behind it? It's going to be the upper management. You may not be dealing with that. And then how those actions add value. Value is so critical. And which particular action is going to have the largest payoff? That's really important. And how does this compare with other recommendations you make? You see, there may be some things, you might have alternatives. You could do this and you get this sort of result, or you could do this and you get this sort of result. And sometimes the client might go for one or the other. It's sometimes nice to have alternatives for them to choose from, depending on which way they'd like to go. It doesn't have to be just one solution. You might have a couple of different solutions. You try this, you do this, or this, that. So that's the sort of thing you want to look at. But remember, just because it's cheap and cheerful doesn't mean it's helpful. Okay? And alternatively, if it's super expensive, it's going to be probably not implemented because they won't be able to allocate the money to it. So you've got to find something that's very practical for the company. Are they affordable? Now, do they have the skills and the structures to actually do it? You know, in my company, we're a small company. I can tell you right now, there are about 4 million things I'd like us to be doing that we're not doing. That we could do, but we are just maxed out every day with what we're already doing. There are innovations, there are new parts of the business I could generate more income from, but I don't have the resources to pump into it. All companies are like that. So, you know, do they have the staff and the structures and the systems to actually implement what you're suggesting? And if they've got to go and get those, have you costed that as a cost to the company to do that? Now, are there outside forces which could impact on you? Regulations change. The interpret in Japan, it's not so much the regulations, it's how they're interpreted that is the killer. So what about suppliers, competitors, customers? Will they take actions that will block you? Japan's a very interesting country. There are secret cartels that operate in this country to squeeze out competitors. Occasionally you'll see in the media, particularly overseas, Japanese cartels getting busted and having to pay huge fines because they're trying to fix the pricing in the market. It goes on a lot here, a lot. So even though you've got a very strong position, you might be working for a foreign entrant, they may have a lot of trouble getting in the market here because the Japanese local suppliers will gang up, have a secret agreement on pricing and block you out. And I've certainly, in my business experience, I've come across that. I was working for an Australian company that was bringing in steel towers for mobile phone networks. The price was about a third of what the Japanese local suppliers could supply the same towers for. They got together as a cartel. They decided which one would take the hit. That company would drop their price and lose money on every tower to drive the Australian competitor out of the business. And when that was removed as a threat and the price went back up to the full price, that company, out of that selection of the other companies, would then start to get the business and get their money back. It was an agreement they had. It was never publicised. You couldn't prove it. I couldn't go to a court and say this is what happened, but you know this is what happened. These things happen in business. So when you do something, what's going to be the reaction? You might come up with a brilliant idea. Don't think the competitor's going to sit around and let you do it. And don't think they're going to play nice. Don't think they're going to play fair. Right? So you better have some idea about dealing with that as well. And internally, can the people in the organisation understand your strategy as well? If it's so convoluted and complex, no one can understand it. How are they going to execute it? So keep it simple, keep it focused, and keep it brief would be some good advice. Just can't see that clock. Tron, how are we going time-wise?
Yeah, we're still fine. 10:30.
What time are you now?
It's almost 10.
Almost 10. Yeah. Great. Thank you. So, as I say, the best, most cleverest idea may not be much help. You know, if they can't buy into it internally and implement it. And of course, most companies, it's not just one division making the decision, because the decision will affect all aspects of the company. So there's got to be some consensus internally that this is the best thing that they should do. So you've got to consider that as well. The ability for the division maybe that you're dealing with to sell it to everyone else as part of your process. And it means that there's got to be a compelling narrative. And it's no good taking people off on tangents on interesting things which are not relevant to the main core. People are busy. Go for the most central things. Keep it very focused on that. Ignore other things which are exciting and interesting but not as relevant. Just leave them out. Even though you found something very interesting for you and possibly interesting in the company, if it's not mainstream and main core, don't go there. Don't bother. Keep it focused very, very tight. And then don't lose your audience in irrelevant detail. Now, when I read through the business plans, often there's a huge amount of dross, a huge amount of surplus words and information which is not central to the key argument. It distracts us from your key argument. It dilutes the power of your key argument. You don't want that. You want to have it very, very tight, sharp, clear, to the point all the time. So be careful about raising non-issues which are going to compete with the key issues. Just because it was interesting, or you thought, oh, this would be nice for them to know. If it's not, put it in an appendix. If it's something you think is sort of sexy and interesting, fine, put it in the appendix, don't put it in the main body, if you want to keep it. So the plan that you're going to write should flow like a good detective novel, you know? You go here, and then you go here, and then you go here, and then you go here, and it flows through. Now, that sounds fairly simple, you know, the plot's got to be credible, it's got to flow and interlock, facts got to support the conclusion. The trick though is, you've got probably 6 to 8 people in a team, all writing different parts of this detective novel, with different styles, different linguistic abilities, and trying to get those bits to match up. Often when we read the plans, it reads like 6 people wrote this. It doesn't read like one person wrote it. So what you might need is to have a very clear look at it. Does this paragraph flow into this paragraph? Does this section flow into the next section? When you finish one section, do you set up the last paragraph to lead into the next section? If anyone's ever read History of the Three Kingdoms, Samgokshi in Japanese, the History of the Three Kingdoms, a very famous Chinese novel, they have a very simple construct when they wrote novels. If you want to find out what happened to, you know, Shi Huang Zhi, we'll talk about it in the next chapter. It's that sort of simple. This is not that simplistic when you're doing it this way, but it should be the same idea that we're going to go into this section of the business plan now. You lead people from one part to the next, from one section to the next, so it flows. It doesn't read like a bunch of disjointed, isolated elements which have no correlation with each other and doesn't link back to your central hypothesis. It's got to gel together, flow together, and be centrally organised around that key argument that you're making from beginning to end. If the paragraphs do not relate to the central argument at some point, take it out and put something else in there that does. That requires a high degree of editing skill by probably 1 or 2 people. I say 1 or 2 because it just makes it simpler in terms of the writing styles and the editing process. So many of you might have Genghis Khan telling you, you're doing this, you're doing this, you're doing this, you're doing this. Make sure Genghis Khan also says, you and you are going to do the final read. You and you are going to edit the final piece to fix all the typos, fix the flow, fix the style, and get a consistent English style through this whole document. So when the judges come to read it, beautiful flow. Easy to follow, easy to understand, all central to the key argument, locks in step all the way through to the central hypothesis, proves completely beyond doubt that what you're saying is true. That's very tight. That's very tight. And that's how you want this to work. So it's a bit like writing a novel. It's got to flow. So in the presentation, I'm suggesting you use inductive reasoning, I should say. So we believe this because of these reasons, 1, 2, 3. Right? You found data. We believe this because data point 1, data point 2, data point 3 proves it. As opposed to deductive reasoning. A is true, B is true, C is true, therefore we believe X. It's a bit too tangential. I think you're better to work off data and say, this is the evidence for our belief. Here's the proof. Bang, bang, bang. From the reader's point of view, it's much easier to follow. Okay, so inductive reasoning works very well. So also, get your key points up the front. For some reason, when people write their documents, they want to hold the jewel. They want to hold this beautiful gem of an insight to the end of the chapter. And then they want to bury it as deeply as possible in a whole bunch of text, so it's very hard to dig it out. Because I'll be reading the plan, and there'll be a really genuine insight that is valuable, but man, you've got to work hard to bring it out. Don't do that. Get your insights up the front, right in the first paragraph. Hit them with a key point early. These judges are busy people. Right? They are going to get a stack of business plans, they're probably this high when you stack them all together and weighs like at least 2 tons. Okay? So it's hard for them. They don't want to waste time. They want to get the key points straight away. Don't hide your stuff at the bottom of the paragraph, the last part of the page. Get up front, get your conclusion at the start. Don't make your audience guess where we're going with this. Tell them where we're going with this and then prove it. Now, they know where they're going and they can follow that more easily. The major points under your hypothesis in one section and the subpoints and subpoints. So you're breaking your chapters down, okay? Main point, then subpoint, subpoint, subpoint with evidence. Okay, conclusion, main point, subpoints, evidence, restate the conclusion. That's a very basic structure. It works extremely well. And as I say, inductive reasoning is going to be probably the fastest and best for you. Now, diversity in the teams is very, very good. Just as I said, I met many of you earlier, very diverse team. Very concerned there's no French people for me to lay into like I normally get to do. Oh, well, there we go. Anyway, so...
we're more worried about the Australians.
Yeah, I didn't meet too many, actually. The diversity of the team is a great thing because it'll bring fresh perspectives to the problem, different ways of looking at things. You know, some people think you've got to start from the macro and go in. Others think you've got to start from the micro and build out. Neither are incorrect or correct. They are both correct. It's just a different way of looking at it. And that's, don't get in a big debate about how you should look at it. Just appreciate that there are different ways of looking at it and value the diversity. You know, it's great because some assumptions need to be challenged. So let people challenge them. The problem-solving process becomes better. And again, varying personality types. Some people are very quiet. Now, are there any engineers in the room? Okay. Engineers are not dumb. Okay? Because they don't brainstorm on the fly. It took me a long time to work that out. I always thought engineers were stupid. You know, you get some of these executive training courses, you know, you're a week somewhere, you're in the dorm and then you're having your meetings and you've got engineers in the room and you've got the whiteboard and what are the engineers doing? Nothing. They don't contribute. They don't say anything. They just sit there. So I thought for years they're all stupid. What I didn't realise was they're deep thinkers. They are processing very deeply and thoroughly to get to a final complete conclusion about what they're hearing. Okay? And they think that marketers like me are a total bunch of flakes who are just standing up there at the whiteboard putting up a bunch of crap and BS on the whiteboard based on no facts, no data, no evidence. Right? So you need both. You need people who can jump around from idea to idea and come up with, tangents and leap out for innovation. And you need other people who are solid around proving it. So don't assume that the people who are quiet in the group are stupid. You may make that assumption. You might think, we got a useless person in our group who don't contribute. Can we hand it back? It may be linguistic. They may not be understanding what's going on. Check for understanding. And if you're a non-native speaker of English, don't be shy about saying, I'm not following this. Put it on the table. I'm not getting this. It was too quick for me. Could you explain it again, please? Be honest. Say it early because then people will appreciate your honesty and appreciate that they are not explaining it correctly. Now, if you're an Australian like me, our entire Australian English is composed of idioms which are totally impenetrable to anybody who wasn't born and raised in Australia. And I know this because when I was working in the trade area before I got into banking and finance, and I was dealing with Australian business people who come up to Japan trying to sell their products and services, they would speak in idioms which no Japanese person had any hope of ever following. But for them, it was very natural. They didn't think about it, right? Or they speak very quickly. So maybe in the group, some people are very fast. They can speak a lot of energy very fast. They could be killing the audience. So Appreciate that everyone will operate a little bit differently here by personality and upbringing and also outlook. And when you're doing brainstorming, one thing I suggest is don't do this sort of brainstorming. Okay, I've got the pen. Now give me the ideas. Come on, hit me with those ideas. I'll write them down. The three people who are the loudest and noisiest in the group will put up 99% of the ideas, and they may or may not be the best ideas. I suggest, whenever you're going to do brainstorming, you take post-it notes and you put the problem on the board and then up here, and then under that people just write on their post-it note neatly and just go up and stick it on the board as they finish each post-it note. So at the end, there's no regulation, there's no dominance. Everybody has an equal chance to put up their ideas on the board. Once they're up on the board, you then arrange them into themes. Oh, these are all basically around supply chain. Oh, these ideas are basically around revenue growth, or whatever it might be. Group them. Group them. Then start looking at that theme, looking at the ideas that come up, and then, as a group, start evaluating which ones you think are the most practical. That is a very simple but very fair way of getting ideas out, and the quietest person in the group might only put up 2 ideas compared to somebody who put up 6, but their 2 ideas could be very deep thought through ideas and be very valuable. So don't isolate people from the thought process by the style in which you run the meeting. So that is a very good process, and don't presume because people are quiet that they don't have an idea. And again, if you're the person who's the managing partner of the team, one of your jobs is to draw people out. So a good way to do that is, or actually a way not to do that is to say, okay, give me some ideas. What do you think? And then suddenly without warning you hit someone with a request, what do you think? And they're thinking, oh, English, I don't have any good ideas, this is going to be embarrassing, I better pass, you know. Don't do it that way. Say, okay, let's all write down our idea on this. Then you give people thinking time. They've all written something down. And then you say, okay, Veronica, what did you have written down? She's got something written down. She's not embarrassed. She's had time to think, and she just tells us what she wrote down, as opposed to, what's your idea? You see, you can do it in different ways that are going to kill people, or otherwise going to support people. The leader of the managing partner of the team should be thinking very carefully about how to get everybody involved in the meetings so that they can contribute, because the richness is in the total group, not in just the noisiest individuals, people like me, who take over the whole show and have all my ideas up there and forget about the rest of you, right? Don't go that route. So here's some common problems. Assumptions. Back up your assumptions with proof. You know, like we talk about, we have the hypothesis, that's an assumption. That's okay. You change it as you go through, based on proof, based on evidence. Make sure that you can show the evidence to back up what you're saying. For example, paying sales incentives to the sales team will lead to a sales increase of 40%. It's what you write in your business plan. And the reason I'm saying that is this is what you actually read in business plans. People write this sort of stuff down. They make this wild assumption that because we're going to pay incentives, sales will go up. Really? Is that true? Where's the proof that that is true? Just don't make a blanket statement without any factual basis to say this is a proof that shows this is reality. Or market share in the US is 25%, so we can expect a similar result here in Japan. Really? On what basis are you saying that? How do you know that? Why can you make that assumption that what happened in America is going to happen in Japan? Where's your proof? It might be what a competitor did. It might be looking at distribution channels. It could be any number of reasons. But just don't put these broad statements with no proof up in the business plan, because I tell you, when the judges get to that, steam, smoke starts pouring out of their ears. They get very frustrated with that. Now, you know, we increase the training budget by X million and we will produce, you know, big sales increase. Well, if you're using Dale Carnegie, that would be true. All right? If you're implying us, that's absolutely clear and proof there, right there, that's correct. Anybody else, very doubtful and dodgy, right? We can use a big advertising campaign to drive the sales up. Really? Is that going to work? Something that simplistic? It might be the answer, but you better show why that works, and you'll be surprised. People will write in the business plans just these broad statements with absolutely no basis in fact or proof or evidence to back it up, and the judges will crucify you. They'll murder you. This could be a problem too. Don't fall in love with the product. I had exciting products like pumps for machinery. That was hard to fall in love with that one. But sometimes you might be dealing with a very sexy product, and you could fall in love with the product and become very dull-eyed about the whole thing. Be very businesslike about it. You might like it. You might think it's good. So what? Are other people going to like it? Are other people going to buy it? What are they going to pay for it? So check. How much will the buyer or end consumer pay? Now, you might, for example, have a retail product. You might be able to go to a retail outlet, and you might be able to stand there and watch people buying a similar product. And you might be able to go up to them and say, in a very quick interview, excuse me, I just like to ask you a few questions. I'm doing a research project around this industry, and I noticed that you were looking at these range of products. Would you mind if I ask you just 2 questions about your thought process around the decision to buy one of these possible products? If you ask politely and explain what you're doing, people will probably give you, 2-3 minutes of their time. And you might ask them, well, what would you expect to pay for something? What would be the sort of range of top and bottom for you to pay for this sort of product? That's very useful. You can check whether the end buyer is prepared to pay or not for a particular price point. Very useful feedback for the client. And, again, test on likely buyers, build your data from there. Be careful, love is blind. Don't fall in love with the product yourself and assume that everyone else is going to be like you. And again, look at the competition, what they're doing. Don't just focus on what's going on in the company. What are the competition doing out in the marketplace? What could they do to us if they felt threatened? Now, as I said before, there are cartels that operate here. People will take a loss leader approach to kill you in the market on a short-term basis to take you out permanently. So, can we grow and just stay under their radar so by the time they realise what we've done, we're in a very strong position? Because if they see what's happening, they may go after you early and kill you. So when you're recommending your proposals to the client, you might want to think about that, how you introduce the innovation that you're coming up with to the client in a way that's not going to trigger a counter-reaction that could be massive on the part of the competition. And in Japan, the competition can be very strong, very well cashed up, and they can take a lot of pain for a lot longer because they don't have to answer to shareholders in the same way that foreign companies have to answer to shareholders. 1 quarter losses in America, you're out, type of approach. In Japan, you can have years of losses and there's no problem. All right? So think about that. There was a Yakult, who was a famous yogurt maker. For 18 years, they lost money in Australia. 18 years before they made money there. How many shareholders in an American company do you think would put up with that? But in Yakult's case, they can lose money for 18 years till they crack that market. So, not every company is going to have that wherewithal to take losses like that. So, if you get a reaction from a competitor, they could drive you out of the market very, very quickly. So, when you do high-level sports, I've been involved in martial arts, in karate at a high level as an athlete. When we go away to compete at a high level, we always go through a whole sort of what-if scenarios. Olympic athletes do this. What if the bus doesn't turn up? What if the equipment isn't there? What if I get injured? What if I feel sick? You go through a whole range of what-ifs before the actual event happens. So that when it happens, you have a plan, you have something in mind, a process to go through. So the same here. What are some what-ifs? The competition does this. What are we going to do? If they do that, what are we going to do? So keep looking over your shoulder in business because you are being stalked by the competitors all the time. So the document obviously must be professional. That sounds simple, except when you've got 6 writers, that's not so easy. And inconsistency, things that are not logical, typos, they come up because there's never enough time, because you're already behind time. I told you before, you're in week 2, you're already behind time. You're already behind schedule. It's going to be even worse at the end when it's panic stations. And trust me, it is going to be panic stations. And every group I give this lecture to, I say, it's going to be panic stations! And everyone goes, no, it won't. Until I get to the end. And I come back and I do the delivery for the oral presentation. I say, how was it? Oh, panic stations! Right? Every group, it's like that. So you're not going to have a lot of opportunity maybe for proofreading, but have people who are specified to do it, and read backwards. When you're doing proofreading, also read backwards, because our brains are so quick, we will skip over illogical or typos because we're compensating for what we already know. Read backwards if you want to find the typos and inconsistencies. So you put air in the document and avoid those 10 centimetre deep paragraphs. Now Japanese is a shocker of a language, you know. Shocker. You're reading Japanese, like you've got a paragraph of kanji. It's just like this, you know. I mean, I get a headache just thinking about reading something that long in Japanese. Don't do the same in English, right? Have paragraphs. Put air between the paragraphs so you fool us psychologically. When we look at the page, it doesn't look like a wall of text, like a granite wall of text. It actually has got breaks in it. It looks like, oh, that doesn't look like much to read. I'll read that. You put a big paragraph that deep in, they go, oh my God, I've got to read that. So put air, bite-sized pieces. And if you've got diagrams, photographs, illustrations, videos, supports, great. Great. That helps, again, for the communication aspect of what you're doing for the judges. Your enemy is lack of time. Plan for that in the beginning. Don't say, we're going to submit on Sunday, the day it's due. You want to have plenty of lead time to have that thing finished way before submission, so you can go back and fix all the problems you're going to find when you find them. Because you'll find that you have the time given to notice what they are, which is great. And as I say, it will be panic station, so brace yourselves for that. Repetition of the same points, you know, you've got multiple authors, so often you read the same point comes up all the time. Whip those out and have the one point. You'll just see that. Again, don't bury those gems. Get them out early, get them up high in the paragraph at the start. The executive summary is worth 20%. Make that baby sing. You really got to work on that. Get that working for you. The oral, as I said before, you can snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. Even though you got the best business plan, someone else presents theirs so much better, they kill you at the finishing post. It happens regularly in JMEC. I go and talk to the judges, they say, yeah, well, the team that came second had a much better business plan. But the team that won presented theirs brilliantly. Hello? What does that tell you, right? So when we come back and we do this in May, we really got to concentrate on making sure we get that presentation aspect right. You've got diamonds in the mud. A lot of people, when you put your plans together, you're burying your diamonds. Get them out. Get them out. Find out what the key insights are and get them out. Get your mentor to help you. Get your advisors to help you to really know it. Because you're going to be so deep in this, after a while, it's all mud to you. And you're not going to see which are the diamonds. Because you're too familiar with it. The insights are not going to be as piercing. For someone reading it for the first time, they go, well, that's a really important insight. Make sure that's high up in the paragraph at the start of the section. Now, if you go to japan.dalecarnegie.com/JMEC, so right there, you've got to write this one down, right? japan.dalecarnegie.com/JMEC. I've prepared 3 things for you. Because you have no time, there's a time management tool called Success Focus Tool. There is a meeting leadership strategies checklist. You will have to run meetings as a team. That checklist has some items on there for you to think about when you're actually running those meetings. And thirdly, there's a self-assessment. Now, if you are disciplined, you can do this. You're at the start of JMEC. Do this. Make 2 copies of the survey. One today. Where are you located today based on these questions? Hold the other one off to after JMEC and do it again, and then you can plot your progress and you can physically see where you have grown. Because you will just be exhausted at the end of this, okay, and elated that you've finished. But this is a good way of actually taking a point in time and comparing your growth through this process of JMEC based around the questions that are in that scale. So it's japan.dalecarnegie.com/JMEC. And if you go to that same website, this is the actual website itself, go to main site and then look for, on the left-hand side, it's got free stuff. There's videos, there's podcasts, there's blogs, there's white papers, there are guidebooks. This is not necessarily about JMEC. This is about you as a business person. We provide a lot of free information for you on that site. This one is a specific page I've created for JMEC where you can download all the stuff that's on that page, okay, for yourself. The other is just, it's a general site, it's where to go. So this is what you're going to look like when you've submitted the document. Yoo-hoo! Great, okay? So good luck, and we have some time for Q&A. So who has the first question? Yes, please, down the back.
Okay, Greg.
Big voice because we're taping this.
Since we are already behind time,
You are. Way behind time.
based on your experience, what would be the best practice or best method that we would conduct interview with the client, knowing that probably all the members are busy and probably the client is busy as well?
Okay, the question is, given you're already behind time, how can you speed the process up by getting that interview process started faster than perhaps normal? The first thing I suggest you do is, when you form your groups, work out your skill sets. Determine the leader. Don't be shy about taking leadership. Work out your hypothesis first. Start to think about who you can talk to second, a priority list of those people. Contact them immediately. Make it in the first week or 2 weeks of starting. That would be my advice. That way you get off to a flying start. Because the people who are in that business, and it might be the client company, because you'll have set pieces of meeting with the client company, of course. I'm talking additional to that. It might be somebody else in the company from a different section you want to go and talk to. Could be a competitor, could be a supplier, could be a distributor. Someone else around that main core. Yes, you had a question here.
Yeah, but it's more kind of a general JMEC question. Do the clients ever actually give you the budgets or a budget of what they're actually willing to spend?
In my experience, yes. They will have some thought about that in some cases. In some cases they won't. In some cases they're just looking for ideas from you, and if it's interesting enough they'll allocate a budget to it. In other cases it may be part of an existing budget allocation. Trot, do you have any views on that?
It's very much case by case, like Greg says, but most companies will give you some idea, in terms of how much they're willing to invest in a business project or what they're actually looking for in terms of the financial parameters.
Yeah, it will vary. It will vary.
So when you start your projects, that's one of the aspects you need to inquire about and make sure you know.
That you work within the
Yes.
budget?
Trust me, if it's got the value, they'll back it up. If they see the value, they'll invest. There was a question just... Yes, sorry, go ahead.
Yes, I have a question about creating the hypothesis.
Yes.
How much information will we get from the client? Will it be sufficient enough to form a pretty good hypothesis before we actually meet them, or should we think about that after the interview?
So the question is about forming the hypothesis. Do you wait until you meet the client and get data from them to form the hypothesis, or do it beforehand? I recommend do it beforehand.
Okay.
You start with the hypothesis based on what you know about business and your intuition and your gut feel. Then you test that hypothesis against what the client tells you. So you've started the process already. When you get to the client, they're going to hit you with a whole bunch of data. What are you going to compare it against? It's just a whole bunch of data, and then you're a bit lost. It's better to have a basic starting point hypothesis of what you think. Then when you hear the information, you go, oh, okay, that part of our hypothesis doesn't work. We need to alter that to this. So you've actually got something to compare against, a measure against that.
What kind of information will we get from the client?
Oh, well, you'll get whatever you ask for, basically. The clients, and in some cases, they may not give you certain financial data. It'll just depend on the company and what they're prepared to tell you. But for the most part, you'll get a lot of information. Because they want you to succeed. They want to get value from the whole JMEC process, so they will be usually free with the information, although some rather sensitive data, they may not want to see that out in the marketplace because they don't want their competitors getting hold of it or whatever. But generally speaking, you'll get quite a bunch of useful data to start off with to test against your initial hypothesis.
Just in answer to that question, when you get your projects, you will first of all get the so-called scope of work draft, which we have agreed with the client, which will specify what you're supposed to do and the deliverables. And also we ask all the project clients to give you a briefing at the beginning of the project. So you should get quite a lot of information up front.
And that's part of the problem. You'll get so much information, you'll then be like, oh my God. So it's good to have a starting point to test it against. And that gives you some direction. Who has the next question? Yes, please.
One of the things you said earlier was that we first meet the clients quite confusion about what they're actually trying to achieve. Sometimes the person who you speak to doesn't really know what the CEO knows. Is there any tips or key questions that you could advise us on for getting the right information out of the client?
I think, again, the question is around meeting the project client and trying to get an idea of clarity around what they want to achieve and whether the person you're meeting will actually have the CEO viewpoint around how this project should run. I think there's probably going to be two levels. There's probably going to be the division level where it's a very concrete thing they're looking at, and they'll be looking at the direct outcomes they have to provide for the senior management. But it's also good when you're doing your process to look at it from a senior management point of view and maybe ask them, how do you think senior management will see this? What do you think the view of senior management would be on investing in something like this? What do you think senior management's idea will be around shareholder value if this actually goes ahead? And get some of that more macro level, because they will be very much in the micro around their world. And it's not a bad idea to pull them out of that world and get them to go up a little bit and think about the bigger picture. Because again, as I say, the decisions around funding something like this will probably come from above, not from them necessarily, unless they've got a budget allocation for that they can actually sign off on. So it's also good to scale them up. Because again, don't assume the people you're meeting have got all the answers. Don't assume they've got all the viewpoints, and don't assume they've taken everything into consideration. They won't. They'll be in their little world, and you are looking at, say, things that they haven't thought about. I mean, if it's obvious, they'd be doing it. And you come back with something that's obvious, where's the value in what you've done? There's no value there. You're going to come back, hopefully, with something they haven't thought about, or something they haven't seen, or some insight they haven't achieved, which is going to give them extra value that they hadn't planned on. That's where the business plan really, really delivers for the project client. Here's the next question. All good? We're right on time as well. So let me say in conclusion, start with the hypothesis based on very little and then test against it and firm it up. When you get to the stage of delivering the actual data, don't have wild statements without proof and evidence. When you find insights, put them at the head of the paragraph of that section so the judges can understand straight away the value you're bringing, and then they'll be looking for the evidence to prove what you've allocated as an insight later in that chapter. Those are very simple things. Have someone clear about their leadership role in directing everybody else. Anyone goes quiet, start to worry. Good luck. I would hope that this goes well for you. You'll get a copy of this presentation after today. There are some details on our website I've prepared for you as well. And also, you will have your oral in May after you've actually already handed off the document. And we will really work on making that baby sing so that when you get in front of the judges and present it, you don't see victory snatched from you and given to somebody else, but you actually take the value you put into the actual document itself, present it in a way that adds a lot of value to the judges and sees you win the competition. So good luck. See you in May. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.